The UFC is a pretty aggressive place to be, so much so that sometimes fights happen outside of the octagon. Just this weekend, while there was a fight going on in the ring, there was a bigger one happening outside of it. In this video, we'll be giving you all the deets about the brawl between Chimaev and Nurmagomedov in the crowd, and top 5 fights outside the octagon. Let's dive right into it. First up, the fight that happened outside the octagon. The UFC 280 went down on the 22nd of October at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi, but we got to experience a fight that wasn't on the card. The incident occurred as a famous retired fighter, Khabib, was presenting Islam Makhachev with the belt following his huge victory over Charles Oliveira. His cousin, Abubakar, who also scored a victory the same night, was having a normal conversation with Chimaev. There was obvious tension between the two. They've had it out for each other for a while now. Both had their hands locked as Abubakar whispered something into Chimaev's ear. This is where the tension was getting worse. A third person tried to intervene and prevent anything physical, but the brawl still happened, as Chimaev was the first to lose his cool and lashed out. Both of them got a good jab in before they were split apart by security and were caught on camera. It seemed like whatever was said got to Chimaev in a second, as he lost control entirely. It took a good 4 to 7 guards to contain them both. It's not clear what words were exchanged between them, but this is pretty similar to his clash with Kevin Holland at UFC 279, which also happened backstage. Up next, how did their rivalry start? Chimaev is a rising star in the UFC world. His fights are dominating and brutal in the cage. He even has a shot at the UFC title, but his interests seem to be divided. While he does his job and wins, he is more inclined towards building a personality like that of the notorious Conor McGregor. The pair have had problems between them since 2021. Khamzat Chimaev said that he'd smash Khabib after broing it up with Ramzan. It was Abubakar, Khabib's cousin, who called him out to say that he betrayed his own homeland and his brothers and gained fame to become a different person. The 32-year-old then pointed at his former friend to say that in America, he sat, trained at the same gym, went to the mosque together with them, and called them brothers. And now he's expressing his deep desire to tear someone up. Khabib recently criticized him for the botched weigh-in at UFC 279 that caused the card to be changed. He thinks it was because Chimaev doesn't have good, strong people around him, specifically Muslims. As his popularity rises, so does his erratic behavior. He's been having more and more incidents and altercations. He was the cause of the chaotic brawl at the UFC 279 press conference, due to which Dana White had to cancel the entire event. Coming up, the beef is already squashed between the two. Now, there are two types of leaders: Dana White, the president of UFC, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Let's start with Dana and then compare both of them. Dana was asked about the whole brawl taking place, and he gave a response that just seemed like an "it is what it is" type. He said that Chimaev is just like that, and there's no point in denying it, that there's nothing he even has to say about it, and that it just happens. But this seemed like his way of promoting the tension rather than diffusing it. He said he has about 800 men and women fighters who are all alpha and will cross paths with animosity between them. No one liked the response. A fight should remain within the cage, where it's safe for the fighters and fun to watch. On the other hand, less than 2 days after the brawl, Khabib already diffused the tension entirely. Chimaev and Team Khabib had dinner together shortly after the brawl, and the issue is completely resolved between the two. Pictures of them hanging out together at dinner came out. Then Khabib recorded a video with everyone standing next to each other, where he said that the incident that happened before didn't represent them well at all. He added that he was tired of the nonsense. They gathered together as brothers, talked to each other, cleared the air, and apologized. He said that he hopes in the future they only gather and fight for good reasons. This is the kind of attitude UFC needs. Now, moving on to 5 fights outside the octagon octagon that went down in UFC history. UFC is a charged sport that takes a toll on you in every way possible, so rivalries and animosities are impossible to avoid outside the cage. Fighters often prepare for fights by messing with each other, and it can turn physical. With that said, let's talk about the top 5 to go down in UFC history. At number 5, Kevin Lee versus Michael Chiesa. It happened ahead of UFC's Fight Night 112. Both Lee and Chiesa were part of what could be one of the most heated exchanges ever seen, at least at a press conference. It was before their bout. Lee took things too far when he brought up Chiesa's mother in his talk, saying that she had tickets to the show. As a child does, Maverick took offense to the statement. He screamed that he'd smash the out of his opponent right then and there, while repeating, "Don't ever talk about my mom." Well, a brawl ensued, but his woes only got worse when he got choked out in the first round after 4.5 minutes. Moving on, at number 4, we have Jorge Masvidal and Leon Edwards. UFC 147 witnessed some welterweight action in and out of the cage. In the actual ring, Masvidal secured a big knockout win over Darren Till, and in the co-main event, Edwards got a decision victory over Gunnar Nelson. You'd think that both the fighters would have had enough action for the day, but who knew they were still charged? Masvidal was giving a post-fight interview when Edwards took some subtle digs at him. Gamebred didn't let him walk away smirking, that's for sure. The Brit approached with his hands behind his back, asking him to repeat what he said to his face. Then he dished out his popular 3-piece and a soda, basically rained a few punches at Edwards' face, leaving him with a cut. The poor guy sure regretted his words when seen bleeding from under his eye. Both fighters have since made peace with each other, and who knows, we might see them face each other and have a fight that pays them sometime soon in the octagon. At number 3, we have Khabib versus the Diaz brothers. Perhaps one of the most sus and unlikely rivalries in UFC history is of Khabib and the Diaz brothers that goes back to 2015. The trio was present at a professional fighters league event where apparently Khabib bullied Nate Diaz. This went from UFC to high school real quick. Nate then retaliated by slapping the Russian. A brawl broke out and he was kicked out of the event for getting physical. The younger Diaz brother then said that he doesn't like the whole bullying scene, but Khabib's into it. Apparently, he ran into him and his team at the event where he was standing watching his friend Jake fight. They allegedly took a group picture with him behind them to make fun of him. That alone sounds made up if we're being honest. He said 12 Russian dudes were laughing at him, causing the slap to happen. The tale of a selfie and a slap? The pair had another altercation at UFC 239, so it hasn't died down yet. Get ready, because at number 2, we have McGregor versus Khabib. One of the biggest and most anticipated fights was between Khabib and McGregor at UFC 229. Leading up to the main event and after it was a series of events that were pretty harsh and shameful. The Notorious is known for his altercations after the main event, but he left nothing to be desired as the build-up alone was insane, to say the least. It was expected that Khabib, the Eagle, would take some major revenge post-fight. It went down in UFC history with all sorts of negative words. McGregor launched an attack on the bus carrying Khabib and 20 other UFC fighters. He threw a dolly at the window, injuring Michael Chiesa and scaring many others. Notorious boasted about it at a press conference with Khabib, while the Russian said nothing and kept his cool. McGregor avoided jail time but paid a huge fine and apologized profusely to everyone, except for Khabib, of course. Dana White condemned the attack, calling it the most disgusting thing to have happened in the history of UFC. Finally, at number 1, we have Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei Silva. TUF Brazil 3 produced one of the most popular moments that went down in UFC history, maybe even the greatest. Chael Sonnen delivered his famous "I can't let you get too close" line before getting in a brawl with Silva. The American gangster didn't seem too fond of of the Brazilian, who continued with his trash talk behind the scenes of the fight. Silva, also known as the Axe Murderer, moved aggressively before Sonnen defended himself, and they both went down in a fury of punches. They were separated by several people. Sonnen came out victorious in the actual match. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about Chimaev and Abubakar's brawl? Which UFC outside the cage fight is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.